Hello, welcome to this video about photographing time-varying light sources. I'm Dan Bennett, and this is a tutorial video that should get you started on the very rewarding area of photographing time-varying light sources. You can go to my website, which is timevaryinglights.com, to see more information, or indeed you can purchase the book. I've got to plug the book, which is a field guide to time-varying light sources, available on Amazon and elsewhere. When it comes to photographing time-varying lights, there are two real approaches that you can take. One of them is what I call a documentary approach, which is where you're trying to capture an image that allows you to understand what the light source is doing. That's a documentary image. The other one, which some of you may find even more rewarding, is art, where you want to make an image that is eye-catching, that is evocative, and that is an image that is really hard to create by any other means. But you'll find from this video that using a camera in what is probably an unorthodox way will actually give you great results. Let's start with creating a documentary image. So for a documentary image, you want something that is simple, straightforward, but clearly shows what the light was doing during the time that you took the photograph. Remember, these are lights which are changing their color, their brightness, or their shape very, very rapidly, so rapidly that the human eye can't see it. But a camera can, as indeed can the human eye if you take certain steps, and you can look at some of my other videos to see how you can observe these lights with the naked eye. But for this video, we're talking about cameras. I recommend that the first thing you should do when taking a documentary picture is to take what I call a reference image. Now, a reference image is simply a conventional photograph of the scene that you're photographing, so that when you look at the time-varying light source swept images that you're going to be taking, you can look at the reference image and say, I can see what each of the things in the scene are. It's another way of helping you communicate. If you have a reference image and then you show your very best time-varying swept image, then side by side, then people can get a better idea in their heads of what it is you've photographed. So, a reference image, how do you take that? Well, to take a reference image, you simply operate the camera in the normal mode. And the easiest way to do that is to set it on a mode like P or auto, which will means that the camera will adjust the settings accordingly. Now remember, you're taking these pictures at night, so it'll be fairly dark. So you may want to increase the ISO, which will be which is the setting that allows the sensor to be a little more sensitive. So you may want a slightly higher ISO, say 800 or 1000, somewhere in that range. Don't push it too high or the image will become noisy. So set it to P, set it to say an ISO of about 1000, and then you're ready to take a reference image. But here is a specific trick, and that is you're not trying to take a picture of the nighttime scene, you're trying to take a picture of the lights in the nighttime scene. So how do you do that? The answer is you underexpose. And the way to underexpose is to use exposure compensation, and a digital SLR like this will allow you to do that very easily, to adjust the exposure compensation down by maybe one stop, a stop and a half, or even 2 stops, take some pictures, and you should get a good reference scene. You may find some camera shake because of the length of the exposure, so a tripod may be useful, or an image stabilization lens. Okay, so that's the reference picture taken and recorded in your camera. Now the fun starts. Here's my recommended method for taking a photograph of a time-varying light source to give a documentary type of image. Set the camera to manual mode. Manual mode is where the camera will no longer make any control inside the camera over the 2 main components of exposure, which are shutter speed, or exposure time, and aperture. You're going to control those manually. Secondly, set the exposure time to be 1/10 of a second. I have found that 1/10 of a second is ideal for documentary pictures. It's also really nice because with 1/10 of a second, it's very easy to calculate how fast a time-varying light source is actually oscillating through its cycle, because you can count the number of pulses or number of colors in that trace to give you a calculation, you know, if there are 12 pulses in the trace, then at 1/10 of a second, that means that the thing is flashing 120 times a second. It's a very easy calculation. I have also found that 1/10 of a second is great because the trace doesn't get too long and complex. We'll save that for later. Stay tuned on the video. Now that we have the camera set to 1/10 of a second, what do you set the aperture to? And the answer is you don't really know until you have taken some shots, and then you can change the aperture to get the optimum results. So now we come to the big question: how do you actually take a photograph of a time-varying light source to give the kind of results that you see on my website or in the book? The answer is you move the camera while you are taking the shot. Definitely no tripod needed in this case. You'll be hand-holding, and you need to develop a certain action. Imagine that I have a time-varying light source over there. I don't, but for the purpose of this video, imagine that I do. What I will do is I will focus on my light source, and with a camera like this, you focus by depressing the button halfway, and then I look above the light source and shoot while bringing the camera down. Focus, shoot, focus, shoot. If you get tired of focusing every time, then you can focus once and then switch the lens to manual focus, in which case you can just do shoot, 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 shoot. In those cases, what I was doing was sweeping the camera downwards across the light source while exposing for 1/10 of a second. You'll find that it's well worth doing multiple photographs like that because it's handheld, not every photograph will come out the same. And by taking multiple photographs, you will get the action, you'll be able to see whether you're getting the trace on the frame or not, and you'll be able to get the very best picture. Furthermore, if you take, say, 15 or 20 photographs of a light source, you look at it on your computer, you'll find 1 or 2 shots which are really the best, and those are the ones that you can work with. So that's how to take a documentary picture. You set the exposure time to 1/10 of a second, and you move the camera while taking the exposure. One thing to note, there are some light sources which are vertical. If you had, for example, a neon tube that runs down the side of a building, then sweeping vertically is not going to help you, because you're going to wipe the image of that tube on top of itself all the way along. So the answer is simple. You're going to sweep horizontally while shooting. So it's up to you to judge which direction to sweep to give you the best results for the light source that you have in front of you. That's how to take documentary pictures. The other area of time-varying light source photography, which is extremely rewarding, is art. The technique for taking art pictures is a little more interesting and a little more fun than it is for documentary pictures. Remember, for documentary pictures, you're trying to get an image that allows you to interpret what the light source is doing so that you can understand its technology, understand its behavior. That's not the same for an art picture. For an art picture, you're trying to create a wow image, something like some of the images that you can see here on the video right now. With the camera still in manual mode, I recommend that you set the exposure time to something longer than 1/10 of a second. It could be 1/4 of a second, all the way up to a whole second if you want. I might have, say, a 6/10 of a second or half a second, something in that range. That gives you time to move the camera in a more creative way when you're taking the shot than you could in 1/10 of a second. It does mean that your image is going to be more, shall we say, congested. There's going to be more data, more light in the image. But that's great. That's what you're trying to achieve. This is art, a visual, eye-popping image, rather than a simple documentary image with very little distraction. So set the camera for a bit longer. In this case, I'm going to set it to, let's say, 8/10 of a second. And then, let's say I have the light source there. The idea is, instead of doing a simple sweep of the camera, I'm going to do a flourish. And by flourish, I mean move the camera interestingly while taking the shot. Let me aim at the video camera here and show you what I mean. Let's say I want a kind of wavy look. I would start on one side of the light source, do a wave across to the other side, and that gives you images that look like this. So an art picture really is done by doing a flourish which creates the shape that you want. And there are many shapes you can use. You could do an up and down zigzag like that. You can do something wild and crazy if you want. Try it, see what you get. And it could be an eye-popping image. Here's an example of exactly that. Of course, aside from doing a flourish or some other complex motion of the camera during the shot, there are other things that you can do that can also add real flair to an art image. One of them is to zoom the camera. And of course that requires a zoom lens. You can't do it with a fixed focal length prime, but a zoom lens allows you to change the focal length while you're taking the picture. So what you would do in this case is you would set the exposure to maybe half a second. Let me do that. Half a second. And zoom the camera while taking the shot. Let me do that again. Zoom. And the result of that might be an image that looks something like this. Another thing that you can do while taking the image is to rotate the camera. Why not? So let's set up this shot at kind of 45 degrees this way and rotate the camera while taking the shot. Let me do that again. That gives an image that might look like this. It turns out that it's possible to zoom the lens and rotate the camera at the same time. Now that sounds like it'd be really complicated, like patting your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time and chewing gum, you know, but it's not. It's actually really, really simple. All you need to do is to take hold of the zoom ring and rotate the camera while holding the zoom ring still. The result is that your camera rotates while you're zooming, and so you would get a shot that might look like this. And then finally, and this might be the walking while chewing gum thing, you can zoom, rotate and do a flourish all at the same time. I don't think I'll demonstrate that right now. I might give myself an injury. But try it, see what you get, and you're going to get some totally amazing images. Now, of course, you might be thinking, well, it's all very well for you, Dan. You've got this fancy schmancy digital SLR, and not everybody has that. Is there any hope for me? Can I take time-varying light source images even when I don't have a camera that's that sophisticated? And the answer is yes, you may, but the results will not be quite as good quality. Here's a cell phone. This one is an LG G2 cell phone, and it has a camera on it. And I have taken time-varying light source pictures with this phone, and they are okay. They're not stellar, but they're okay. How would you do it? Well, what I would do as follows. I would start the camera app, and then I would set the ISO and the exposure down a lot. And the reason for that is that the camera is typically one that will increase the brightness, increase the gain to make an image stand out. But if you're taking pictures of lights, you don't want that to happen. You want the gain to be down a long way. Now, thankfully, my camera app here allows me to adjust the ISO, which is the sensitivity, all the way down in the settings. In addition to that, I can turn the brightness of the image down in the settings, and that gives me a good platform for taking time-varying light source pictures. How do you take them? Well, it's the same kind of technique, but you don't really have control over aperture and shutter speed. You've just got to kind of guess. So you put your thumb over the button, and then you sweep like this, and you hope that it takes pictures while you're sweeping the cell phone. It does work. I've tried it, and here's an example of a picture that resulted. Well, that just about wraps up the video on techniques for taking photographs of time-varying light sources. I hope it was useful, and there is more information on techniques and details in the book, so go ahead and be sure you buy that and see what else there is to read on the topic. I do have another video on my website which is on the topic of post-production. In other words, now that you've got those photographs out of your camera onto your computer, what can you do with them to make them really, really amazing? Go and check that video out, and thanks for watching.